All right, everybody, welcome to the May edition of the American Praetorians live stream. Hopefully, at some point here, we will shortly have Mike Massa joining us if his internet connection,
technical issues have occurred.
His technical issues get sorted out.
So until then, it's just us.
Yeah.
So, Pete, what have you been working on?
Trying to wrap up Silver or Lead.
Yeah.
Getting down to the wire on it, but it'll get done.
You had to like re-outline that or adjust the outline on that, didn't you?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
But it's all coming together.
It's coming together.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and then Last Centurion should be, when's that set to come out?
I don't actually have a release date for that one yet. Jason's going over it right now. But, he seems to like it, just judging from his tweet the other day.
Yeah.
So that's encouraging. When I sent it in and let Walt know that I'd done so, he just asked, "Brutal?" ? Very.
Well, yeah, as if you were going to do something else.
Yeah.
Like, I've never known you for the light and fluffy versions of these kinds of stories.
No. It's like when I was taking my first turn at science fiction a few years back and came to the realization I just cannot write PG-13 violence.
You can write PG-13 everything else, just not the violence.
Yeah. I don't know. Some of the language can definitely be pretty hard R sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. But like, what was it you told me? Like, the way you figured out how to do it is to consciously make a choice not to cuss in your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, that's kind of shown through. It's not like your first step out where it was, what did you say? You had like over 270 F words.
Oh, it was closer to 500.
Oh yeah.
In
so even that was clean by our standards, but
yeah.
It's brutal. Who was it? Larry and Steve on the Writer Dojo just did an episode not too recently, or not too far back, about how to do the profanity in book form. And it's the psychological thing of like, you're subconsciously reading one line ahead, then you're reading the line, and then it's still in your mind as you go on. Oh, hey, Mike.
Finally made it.
Hey, guys. I hear you quite clearly. I'm not sure if you can see me adequately. How copy?
Yep, we got you.
All good.
Okay, super.
Definitely dealing with some.
If any time my audio goes really bad or the video gets skitty, yeah, hotel. It's been great till tonight.
No.
You should have sprang for that premium, Wi-Fi access.
I'm gonna try to. I'm trying. I'm gonna go ahead and pop off and pop on using my native cell phone connection to see if that makes a difference. Okay.
All right.
All right. We'll be here. I'm detecting a lag.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so like in reading profanity, like each instance of it is actually like 3 instances in the mind. And they bring up very good points. But I'm also like, yeah, I don't see it. And maybe it's just because I'm a Marine and every second word is a cuss word, but I'm just like, nah.
No, we used profanity as punctuation. It didn't even mean anything anymore.
We're talking about books in general, Mike, not your appearance.
I have been
The
told
timing was perfect.
I've been told that my presence can generate profanity, so it's all good. Proceed.
So how have you been? What have you been up to?
I'm in our nation's capital.
Oh,
I've forgotten just how shitty the traffic is here. Oh my gosh, it's terrible.
That's why I don't go up there.
I'd forgotten how inadequate the signage is for exits from freeways where there's not another option to leave for about 30 miles.
Well, yeah, because it's all the paid HOV lanes and toll roads and all that.
Yep. Lots of one-way streets, lots of blocked-off streets, lots of motorcades where you're basically locked in place for half an hour. Good times.
Yeah.
Look, I live like right outside DC, and I've never said that about going into DC.
I remember trying to avoid the toll roads because the company wouldn't reimburse us when we were going through that area for training.
Well, I'm actually coming to you live from Arlington, and I'm using my cell propped up on my non-functioning internet connection in order to get adequate throughput. How's that for a high-quality hotel premium Wi-Fi?
I was expecting you to get the Cheetah system out with a little folding sat and get your little tough book out.
When you said Cheetah, I thought you were referring to the new pistol that's the new hotness amongst the practical shooter cult.
Oh, the practical shooter cult. We were just talking about there's especially bad is this YouTube channel called like Classic Firearms, but they hate the new SIG so much that they're like just pulling any argument out of the ether of why the M16 and M4 are better, so that the military stays on with that. And they're citing an Army Times article that cites YouTube videos. So it's like,
yep. Yeah.
If they went far enough back, they'll find that they're citing themselves. It's about 6 or 7 points of departure removed. Yeah. Good times. Yeah. No, there's very little irritating. Well, that's not true. There's plenty of irritating things, but right in the top 10 or so are people that have just enough gun knowledge to sound credible, but not enough to really be authoritative, telling you something about a firearm that you went to the armorer's course and insisting that they're right. You're like, how's that work again? Oh, fascinating. Yes, screw right off.
See, that's why I limit my gun commentary to the very superficial stuff. Like, this gun looks way cooler than that gun.
Right.
Nobody can ever tell me I'm wrong. It's just,
they'll
just be like, you have very weird taste.
Well, I'm going to be attending a practical pistol shooting clinic from a group called Citizens Defense Research. It'll be my 3rd time going. And the first time I went, it was a lot like my first serious practical carbine shooting class that I had taken in about 15, 20 years. Yeah. The improvements in philosophy and function and reliability and reasonable, I guess I call it a reasonable philosophy of use, to quote a really verbose popular YouTuber on guns, is moved on so far from where I was that when I did the pistol piece, it was similar, and I was embarrassingly bad compared to some of the people that were there that were all tuned up.
Right.
So this is my 3rd year going back, and they're really quite good.
Yeah, is like the practical shooting stuff, is that just like bare bones, like these are the fundamentals and the situations you're going to use them in? Or is it more like the CrossFit of the gun world, where it's like while you're carrying groceries, draw and fire 2 to the chest?
No, this isn't what's it called? Desert brutality or winter brutality. I don't subscribe to that particular philosophy. I think there's interesting things to be learned about how to improve your kit so shit doesn't fall off you when you're doing immediate action drills. There's some utility there.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure I buy into the philosophical underpinnings of that stuff. This is more, okay, you have a threat 3 meters in front of you, and you need to build the skills so that you can move your concealing garment away, draw, present, and put 2 rounds into a 1-inch circle in a second and a half.
Okay, so like actual practical stuff. It's not just it's not like Detroit urban survival training or whatever.
I mean, their recommendations on Detroit is just don't go.
You're right.
The best way to win in a gunfight is to avoid one.
Yeah.
Or the one before Detroit urban survival, Voda. Oh
yeah, that and anything with Israeli in the name.
Oh
yeah. There's a video going around of an Israeli security and training company where the guys bob their heads in and out, like to confuse the person that's already watching the funnel of death. Like they're gonna neo the incoming 5.56 round. And I thought they were having me on, like this was a joke, like they were like it was a long form meme. No, they were legit serious. I'm like, who would go to that and believe that?
Well, the best part about that is that video got so flamed on the internet that they took it down, but not before people released meme versions of it with like the Night at the Roxbury, what is love?
And, In fact, that Night at the Roxbury version is on Coopery's YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. No, when I saw it maybe a year and a half ago, it was already old on the internet. I'm not sure how old. But I thought, okay, this is kind of funny. These guys are obviously making fun of the. Wait, are they making? Are they? Is this real life?
It's like when the kids finally start eating the Tide Pods after like a year and a half of everybody making fun of it.
Right.
There was another one like that. Dudes are like on a 3-gun stage with looks like maybe an AP9 or something like that. And he's like shooting 2 rounds, flipping the gun to the side to look at the ejection port, running to his next point, shooting 2 rounds, flipping the gun to the side to look at the ejection port. And it's like, stop it.
Or you could just clean your gun and not have to worry about it jamming like that.
Yeah. Heresy. If your gun doesn't jam at least every 3rd magazine, you didn't spend enough on it.
Yeah.
Just ask your average Staccato owner who bought aftermarket mags.
Well, they spent all that money on the pistol. They have no money for all the proprietary mags and that shit.
I'll tell you that the guys that are going to this course, I showed up kind of embarrassed. I have a very plain Jane rig with a very basic optic and so forth, mostly for my old man eyes, but really not a whole lot of go fast gear. And I almost everybody that I saw was carrying or using for the class what they would actually be carrying. So there wasn't a whole lot of there weren't a lot of race rigs present at the course, and people were still shooting really, really well. I was quite impressed.
Yeah, I mean, what you got? I think, my actual plate carrier is about as bare bones as you can get. It's like I have maybe 1 extra pouch for if I somehow come across an enemy radio, but I'm not buying my own MPU U5 to put in it. So it's like, and if I'm using like the little Motorola's, I'm just clipping that to the shoulder strap. I'm not.
Sorry, that was tech support and hanging up on them.
Wow.
My shotgun has absolutely no attachments on it whatsoever.
Really? Not even a side saddle?
Okay, that's. Yeah, but it's the spandex one or the nylon spandex one. So I don't count it as an attachment, more just like a bit of clothing to keep it modest.
It's a bit of a Spanx for your shotgun.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, but no lights, no optics, nothing. It's because like at the end of the day, the point of a shotgun is to give you the most firepower for the lightest package you put it in.
And let's face it, a shotgun is a relatively close range weapon.
Yeah.
If you're putting a magnifier on a shotgun, I question how far you think that you're going to get with that.
Well, it's look, man, I'm in Northern Virginia, so it's like if I have to use that shotgun on somebody, chances are like I don't want anything I'd rather keep on that thing because it might just have to yeet that thing.
Totally with you.
I still shoot. I have a couple of shotguns, but my current favorite is an old school Remington 870, very unfancy.
Yep.
I got it from a police auction back when the police still sold guns that they were getting rid of. It
How
was a
many
police.
gift cards did you bid on it?
Oh, I think I got the whole. It was a Remington PMax, about 15 years old. I think it had been fired for qualification maybe 20 times, like 20 rounds through it. It has significant rack wear, but no mechanical wear. Because who wants to qualify with a shotgun if you're a cop, right? It's not comfortable. Right. And it runs all day. It eats anything. It doesn't jam. It came with factory ghost ring sights. It came with a factory pistol group, which I pulled off and I put in a straight stock. And it runs all day.
Yeah.
And I think with the stock that I dropped on it, I might have $160 in it. I spend more on ammo for that thing than the gun's worth.
Yeah. Pavlo John just brought up Larry and his shotgun bona fides, as it were, and that reminds me. Yeah, on the complete opposite spectrum of what I just said about my bare bones 870, I also have the RAS 12, a couple of RAS 12 uppers, which were the precursor to the Genesis 12 that's hitting the markets now. So it's like, yeah, I have the most practical version of a shotgun and also the most impractical fucking cool guy shotgun you can possibly
get. The 1301s have generated a lot of buzz and a lot of love, and I've seen the videos of guys shooting them with, very, very high rates of fire and apparently very accurately. Yeah. I've never shot one.
The 1301s and the M4s are probably like the best tactical shotgun you can ask for. I think the 1301, or no, it might be the M3. That's the Benelli that you can switch from semi-auto to pump.
Yeah.
But, it does everything the SPAS 12 does, except way better and isn't a pain in the dick to actually use. So
I bought a HK stamped Super 90 M1 Benelli back in the mid-90s. And I found that if you tried to hang accessories off it, the dang thing wouldn't run because it's an inertia operated shotgun action.
Right.
So it wants to be run stock.
Yeah.
And that's what I ended up. I didn't use any parts because you can mix and match like Legos. I hung a 28-inch Super Black Eagle barrel on it and got rid of the pistol grip, and now it's a waterfowling gun that can get wet. And it runs all day. It'll eat 3-inch heavy shot magnums all day long.
Of course, it was the 90s, so like maybe you just weren't chicken winging it enough. Just
between that and the modified Weaver, you mean? Yeah, sure. The only shotgun I carried in active duty was an 870 with plaster rounds for breaching doors.
Yeah. I always did want the
forearm this way while you're chicken winging to get that full shoulder pocket and tucking the elbow up against your rib cage.
Yeah, I was the embarrassing old FUD at my first carving course about a decade ago when I hadn't gone to one in 20 years at that point or 15 years at that point. And they immediately goes, "Oh, we spotted the veteran." When'd you get out? About 1998, 99? I'm like, oh shit. So yeah. Now I'm not nearly as embarrassing to shoot around. I think most of the guys that learned that are either learned the right way or a better way, or flat out died out.
They were still teaching that kind of that version of standing on the known days, the KD range when I was in the early 2000s.
Well, gosh, even as late as like 2009, they were still doing it, but they weren't saying you had to do it this way. It was just like, look, this is the KD range you're shooting for score and you're not getting shot back at. So just find whichever way is the absolute most stable for you to do this stuff.
We teach the more modified isosceles stuff mainly for speed and stability and accuracy.
Right.
The KD shooting is not what you're going to run into.
No, because I mean, look, in combat, I'm not taking the 2-point sling off and
making your
cutting off
your
the
loop
circulation of my bicep and then.
I don't pretend to be an expert, but I was told by the guys at the clinics I've gone to and by guys on active duty that the big benefit of the isosceles, if you're wearing a plate carrier, is you're presenting the strike face more squarely to your adversary if you happen to be getting shot at, as opposed to offering them your armpit to shoot at.
Yeah.
Which
if you're unarmored and blading works, go for it.
Right.
But yeah, that was originally how I got taught the isosceles, was you're presenting your plates to the enemy.
Yeah. Shoot me in the centering. That's where I want the bullet to go. And I was always taught, if they're shooting at you, stop fucking standing up and lie your ass down and shoot back. So
much of it, and this kind of got turned over into the flat range stuff, but it was CQB shooting, which is why so many people never shoot a rifle past about 50 yards. But it was for, you're going through that door and you're probably going to get shot anyway. So make sure you get shot in the plate.
Yeah.
Or you
makes
could be
sense.
two-man and,
it's been a long time since I was in a stack going into a kill house. But I played Op4 later on, and it's kind of like the rules of a knife fight, right? If you do an entry, a lot of folks are going to be getting shot if the bad guys that are all competent.
Yeah.
Especially if you only have 1 point of entry. I mean, sucks to be a fucking entry team. That's why you put the guys in front, man.
Yeah, even if they're not competent, you're still like the casualty rate for clearing a room is still like 70% because they know where you're coming in. They really can't fuck that up,
Yeah, and that's why there's been a lot of a shift in CQB doctrine. Not as much as maybe there should be, but because most of it was built off of hostage rescue, which is flood that room as fast as possible, because guess what? That hostage is more valuable than you are.
And it's also, you're going in with a stack of 8 guys and there might be 4 dudes in the room.
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, when I was in, and I'm sure when you guys were in, it was, you and one other guy, hopefully, and you go clear that room. How many people are in it? Don't fucking know. Go in it.
Yeah. We'll gauge how many people in there from the volume of fire.
The next 2 guys are going to the next room down, so make sure you get through that door before they pass you so they don't get shot.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see what tactical doctrine, and it's already begun, but I'm really curious to see what amount and what pieces of tactical doctrine, from individual movement and entry protocols to block clearing and city fighting protocols, logistics, indirect fire, the works, we're going to take on board from the lessons being paid for in blood or purchased for blood in Ukraine right now. It's a lot of pet theories are being absolutely demolished as they work in those cities.
Which is also, it's like why I don't feel good about it, but I've kind of come full circle on like that aid package that we send them, when I realized that like most of it is just like stuff that we were going to decommission anyways. And it would have been more expensive to get rid of it the safe way rather than just hand it to somebody that's going to use it and then take notes on how it's being used and how effective it is and that stuff.
Let's not take notes on things like just tossing landmines out of the back of a 5-ton or rolling up a dump truck full of landmines and just tipping it up.
Well, looking at how they're using technology, sort of segueing, if it isn't premature, into writing and the projects I have going on. I've been comparing a lot of the recently, so the last decade of future, projecting what fighting is going to look like in 10, 20, 30 years, millisecond. What have we gotten right and what have we gotten wrong? And one of the things that nobody really got even remotely close is the significance of pervasive, omnipresent surveillance.
Yep.
Like if you're anywhere near the front within a click or two, you are being observed, like right then, right now. And the other rule being, if you can see somebody, you can probably kill them. And so that is something, and the use of dirt cheap commercial drones to do so is something that I don't think anybody got right, unless you guys know a countervailing example.
No, I've mainly been on the receiving end of that. I think we're going to have more of a standoff fight rather than, knife fight and phone boost sort of gunfights, until you get to the point where like you have these guys locked down, and as soon as they exit the door, you can just like hit them with a drone. So they're going to be staying in that. Now it's going to be like a siege style, clearing.
Eventually, somebody's going to have to go in there. After
right? Yeah. It's like you're not going to get rid of the grunt. You're not going to get rid of the individual operator, but you are going to really dictate the circumstances that require them a lot more than before.
Do you think that the terms of engagement, the way that they're fighting, is something that we're going to see ourselves? Because a lot of their current doctrine is dictated because nobody has an aerial advantage. Nobody owns the air enough to be able to park an AC-130 overhead and hit you with a little green laser and start thumping out 105s. And so they're relying on indirect fire, and they're actually shooting their magazines dry. So the availability of rounds becomes a determining factor for the pace of combat. And I don't think that's something else that I can't think of a MilSF writer that got that particular detail worked into their narrative. And it's one of the guiding principles and determinations, one of the determining variables for this conflict is who has the deepest magazine of artillery can sustain the offensive the longest. And if you don't have that, then you're back to World War I trench siege tactics.
What we're really seeing in Ukraine is like how much everybody in the world forgot how to fight a conventional war, which means war of attrition and logistics chains and all that. And with conventional wars, they never start the same way they end. Like they're fought completely differently by the end stages of that, because either resources run dry, alliances change, territories change, and the doctrines change, because you're not worried about like, all right, how are we going to reshape military doctrine for the next 20 years? Like, how am I going to survive the next 3 months? So,
yeah. And I think that's a perspective that a lot of people in the five-sided squirrel cage don't necessarily have. They're thinking in terms of what's our revolution in military affairs kind of bullshit. But for the guy on the ground, it's like you said, how do I survive the next 3 days?
Yeah. And especially in Ukraine, like the videos I've seen coming out of like actually clearing a building, it's the siege tactics. Like somebody decided to have a backpack full of hand grenades and just like keep passing them out to the guys that are stacked up outside the house. What would have taken us about like 2 minutes to clear a full fucking compound in Afghanistan takes these guys around like 30 to 40 minutes. And by the time they clear that and, there's no threats available, a rocket hits them and caves in the roof overhead of them. So it's like both sides are losing on that, because while they're stacked about there trying to take this room or this house without dying, the enemy is like, all right, well, we've lost that unit, but we can at least, retaliate with arty. So,
yeah, Chuck Gannon, who writes Near Future MilSF with Space Combat, is one of the guys that seemed to get it the most right with how he hypothesized the use of fully autonomous drones, both in aerospace and in space.
Yeah.
And in one of the really technologically advanced races was able, and because of their, I won't say pacifistic, but their strong aversion to close combat, evolved this technology that was near sapient level. And their technology and their autonomous systems, which didn't rely on speed of light comms with a mother platform, 30 or 40 or 60 or 100 million light seconds away, became a decisive advantage because they were inside the bad guy's decision loop. And then he would switch to ground combat, and he actually he kind of relied more on telepresence which reminds me of those first-person shooter drones that the Ukrainians are using. They've adapted those high-speed racing drones that can do like 50, 60 kph and fly through a target diameter barely bigger than the rotor width. So they're sending them into the hatches of open armored vehicles. He got a lot of that right, but even he didn't identify. There's going to be some 18-year-old with a GoPro strapped to a DJI Parrot, and he's an autist, and all he cares about is keeping track of you and passing out on a cell phone to some fire direction control center that happens to have some extra 122 rounds left over from the Czechoslovakian war, and they send it your way because they can.
And we're also, especially if you listen to the comment out of the Marine Corps, but there's going to be a transition from like tube IDF to loitering drones. So it's like you can put like an anti-personnel switchblade. It's called a switchblade. Anti-personnel drone that will loiter for about 20 to 30 minutes of flight time at max. And your kid with the cell phone and the controller is using that as a surveillance target, but also they can identify the target and then hit go, and then it speeds up to like 100 miles an hour, hits them, and you've got a 40 Mike casualty radius. They also have the anti-tank version, which it's essentially a javelin that does the same thing.
Except it's a fraction of the price.
Yeah, and here's the scary part about both of those is the anti-tank version with the tandem charge is like $30,000, maybe even cheaper than that, and the anti-personnel version is $10,000. So they're talking about just stacking them in backpacks and letting like regular grunts carry those around. So it's a lot different than a mortar team with 60s having to hump out with you. So.
Yeah, I remember having to hump a freaking 60 base plate when it was my turn to do that. The smaller switchblade with the grenade payload costs a lot less than 10K. I think it's closer to like, if you buy them in small amounts, it's 6,000 a unit, and if you buy them by the hundreds, you can get that down to like $2,500 a unit.
Oh yeah. The Costco bulk pricing.
And if you compare the how much it costs to either recruit or Shanghai a conscript, minimally train, equip, and transport and sustain them, it's a lot more than $3,000. Yeah. So, and that's if you don't get an officer or a non-com or a technical operator. The economic advantage is so profound. And we know that the pacing threat countries are investigating that tech. Hell, one of them is selling that to the Russians.
Yeah. Well, that stuff that changed the little conflict that popped up in Azerbaijan and Armenia. Which, when it first kicked off, the Armenians were wrecking house, and then the Turks started providing those kinds of drones to the Azeris, and the dynamics flipped, and the Azeris were taken over after that. So it's not a lot of people or not a lot of factions are up to date on that kind of tech. So. Yeah,
the big tandem warhead one in small amounts is about 60K. You can get it down to about half of that if you buy a whole bunch. And then the other one is, as I said, it's in the low thousands if you buy them in bulk. The other thing, and I'll name Dave Weber. He's notorious for a lot of things, but one of them is gigantic space battles with thousands and thousands of missiles being fired between opposing space dreadnoughts. But one of the things I think he got right was the concept of the good guys increasing their magazine depth by having missiles or magazines parked outside his make-believe ships. And I was looking at the open source reports about the Russians trying to scrub one of the Patriot batteries in Kyiv a few nights ago. And the totality of their attack, as reported in open press, was 6 of their relatively short-range Kinzhal missiles, the ones that go hypersonic during a portion of their flight, about a half a dozen to a dozen Tomahawk skis, so basically a Tomahawk knockoff or equivalent in payload and range, and tactical Tomahawk, and then maybe a dozen or so of those real cheap kit-built Iranian Shahed drones. And that was their entire attack. 6 high-end, a dozen medium, and a dozen throwaways. Compare that to the last major strike the U.S. did in Syria back in 2018. I think we dumped 64 Tomahawks into a single target to saturate its defenses in Syria and just smear the living crap out of it. So the magazine depth makes a big difference. You need to have a big enough volley, if you will. And so that means that there's an entering argument, an entering price point with these non-tube launched artillery, where if you don't have the ability to send a whole bunch at once, you may as well send any.
Yeah. And we're starting to run into the potential of that problem in the Pacific, particularly the Western Pacific, getting into just to the second island chain around China, because the sheer volume of anti-ship missiles that they're starting to deploy along that line is more than we can deal with.
Yeah.
Particularly as we are sending a whole lot of our own ordnance to Ukraine, to the point that we've had artillery units that have been short for training ammo because it's all going to the Ukrainians in the last year. And our production is just not up to the task.
Well, it's also the production's not up to the task because what they've done is they've sort of co-opted or repurposed a lot of the production pipeline to these new technologies. And a lot of stuff that they were sending to Ukraine was stuff that we already had in our arsenal. So it's a way to deplete all of our stores and replace it with the new stuff. But yeah, the training, you're just not going to get it.
We're really refreshing the contents of a lot of our magazines right now. Yeah. But in the meantime, we're running short. And on the other hand, if the Ukrainians hadn't dead nuts stopped the Russian advance in some areas and held the line in others, that would have been an interesting. If the Russians had successfully annexed major chunks of Ukraine or the whole thing, and then gotten everybody to sort of accept that as a status quo, that's an interesting message to communicate to other countries in the Indo-PACOM region. So maybe the fact the Russians have lost 100,000 people since December in one city alone is sobering. I hope so. Certainly, I'd be paying attention.
As for whoever runs out of ordnance last wins, on some level, I'd say yes. On other levels, I'd say not necessarily.
It's the delivery platforms that you need to worry about. Think of it like, all right, from a naval perspective, there's something, especially with China, that they're worried about, which is the first exchange. Who survives after the first exchange? So China sends all of their first exchange of ordnance our way. We send all of our first exchange there. How many ships of theirs do we destroy? How many ships of ours do they destroy? And then after that exchange is done, who's going to win the second exchange? So if they're able to take out our launch platforms during that first exchange, we're not going to do too hot on the second exchange. So it's not just whoever has the most ordnance wins. It's how effectively that's used and target discretion and selection in the early parts of the conflict.
It's also getting into I've objected for a long time to this, the generations of war, but the different gradients of war, I think, is a better term. And the higher tech stuff, particularly in a high intensity conflict, is going to get used up, and it's going to take a lot more to replace it.
Yeah, and I mean that was there is an argument for the much more simpler and easy to replace and easy to manufacture weapon systems. So it's like that's kind of why I like the Switchblades, is because both versions of them, they're relatively very simple tech, which is why they're so cheap. It's because what they just did is they took, all right, for the 30-pound anti-tank version, they just took the simplest parts of a Javelin and stuck it on a commercial drone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, which got you also have to worry about like the consumer level parity with the modern weapon systems, and it's not just like the high tech versions of like whatever you want to call like 5th generation warfare or whatever the emerging version of warfare is. It's also the social aspect. It's because here's what the Ukrainians were doing when the Russians first came in. First up, like the Russian conscripts didn't know shit about OPSEC. Like, you know, they weren't taught that in the like 48 hours of training they got before they were shoved on a train and sent to the front lines. So what happened was the Ukrainians were catfishing them on Tinder. They were like getting like these fake, you know, Ukrainian bombshell model photos of women, creating fake Tinder profiles, and then seeking out Russian conscripts that were going to be. It was like, oh, I'm not cool with Zelensky's, government. I don't like the Ukrainians. I can't wait for the Russians to come and liberate us. And I would like to get with a big, strong Russian. Where are you going to be? Like, maybe we can meet up.
Maybe we can connect.
And they fell for it. And so the Ukrainians got a shitload of troop movement intel just off that alone, and then just started dropping bombs on them. So that's going to be interesting when we go into if and when we go into a hot conflict with China, is because like on one hand, the Chinese are kind of like leading this charge of, you know, catfishing and mass data collection through that stuff. But on the other hand, like the average Chinese citizen doesn't have the internet. They have the China net. So it's like, what happens when a bunch of Western kids are like, okay, let's just get a bunch of Starlink over there and show these Chinese kids like what the actual internet is like and just fuck with them. So
yeah, you mentioned Starlink. That's another good example of a technology that's enormously disruptive that has been inadequately presented in a science fiction scenario for near-term MIL-SF. The idea that you can have a pervasive, unjammable, easily replaceable, high throughput, high bandwidth SATCOM system still blows my mind. Because one of the rules was as soon as the war goes hot, your SATCOM bandwidth all goes to the high side, and there's nothing left over.
Yeah.
And now it's on demand. How much do you want? Go ahead.
Well, it's in order to incorporate the social engineering side of operations using those communication forms, that is so messy that I'm sure a lot of authors are like, yeah, it's interesting. I don't want to fuck with it though. Like I'd rather just, streamline my story for all the cool action parts instead of, it's like showing the crazy, I don't know, 4chan exchanges like in my space opera.
Yeah. But both on the straight up fiction side, someone like Tom Clancy, who made his bones by writing in the really specific, credible details behind the battles and the launches, or someone like Neil Stevenson, who has written, MIL-SF combat-ish kinds of stuff, but brings the geeks into it. A virus that is spread in a README file that's cleverly misnamed, and a terrorist economy being funded in a open world RPG game by the exchange of value storage cards that are represented in certain magical artifacts in game. That's a real way to move money around the farming
that you can pay for an operation just with like World of Warcraft gold or some shit.
Exactly. Like there was during its heyday, there was like a legit dollar to World of Warcraft gold exchange rate.
Yep. Which that actually helped Venezuela or Venezuelans out a lot when their currency crashed.
Yeah.
There was the original like NFT was it was like these meme trading cards. So it's like different versions of Pepe the Frog and that stuff. And in order to make them valuable as a trading card, and this was just like an experiment that some idiot did on the internet, just to say that he did, they applied like a blockchain of some sort of cryptocurrency or like Bitcoin or something. So each of these images and digital trading cards, as they were, had a financial value. And it was way more than the actual like Venezuelan currency. So the Venezuelans started, it's like, please get on your computer and get as many of these things as possible, because this is how we're going to eat.
Yeah, there were, and when they couldn't get to the NFTs, the Venezuelans were exchanging bolivars, their currency, for in-game intangible digital products that they could resell, because the inflation rate on those game items was a lot less than the inflation rate on their national currency.
Yep.
Which is, I mean, that's holy crap.
Yeah. Well, I think there was actually at least one Al-Qaeda cell that was using one of these MMOs as a communications platform for a while.
Well, yeah, they would go into the lobbies, and like in the game lobbies, that's how they would communicate. It's because, and on one hand, it was brilliant for a moment, but then after that, like the nerds at Fort Meade kind of picked up on it, and they let it continue for years because it was a herding effect. You take out all the stuff that's really hard to deal with, and then leave the easy ones alone, so that everybody sort of congregates at the easy ones, and then you just like watch and collect data. So.
Yeah. Well, on the social engineering side, and I've delved into this a little bit in my latest series, is just social media makes people stupid or stupider. And you just look at some of the stuff that our people have posted, when it's like, yeah, you're not supposed to be telling people that you're in this particular place or that you have this particular set of gear.
Name me a mill sci-fi author that figured that the best intel gathering you could do was just by going on the War Thunder forums and just getting every readout for every enemy platform, period.
Yeah.
Or if there's one you want to be curious about, start asking really stupid questions, knowing you're going to find the autist with the clearance that tells you all about his favorite thing, because you tell him you don't believe him, he's full of shit. He goes, oh yeah, look at this. Oh,
the best way to get the best way to get the right answer on the internet is to intentionally post the wrong answer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
people
also
will not be able to avoid the reflex to correct you.
Yeah.
There was some Ukrainian unit that got smoked because some idiot American was with them and was posting on Reddit or something with photos and video, and somebody on the Russian side pinpointed where it was and called in the strike.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you've got weirdos on Reddit spending like 24 hours a day to figure out where Shia LaBeouf is hiding just based on the background of his photo, and I've actually used that scenario. It's like have a hostage video sent, and it's like, okay, come here, nerd.
Yeah,
find me where this is.
Before we get blown up in the comments, that was all 4chan. That wasn't Reddit.
Oh,
4chan will be very upset if Reddit gets the credit for that.
Yeah, that was 4chan that noticed that there was a unique non-recurring pattern in the wood grain on the wall behind him. And they began, was it going through Airbnb or Verbo cabins for rent? So, within 1,000 miles of where he said he was. And then somebody wrote a script to magnify the picture and look for the wood grain pattern, and then narrowed it down.
They found him. When he was in Finland, that's how they got it. Because, I mean, where he was in Finland, the population density is like 3 per 100 kilometers, not per mile. So once they kind of figured out like the general 500 square foot or square mile radius that he was in, that's when they were just like, okay, now it's way easier to track down IP addresses and things like that.
I preferred their win where they he had a picture of a flag saying "Come get me," and there's like just 2 random contrails in the sky, and that's all it took.
Well, That's what got them in the general areas. They mapped it by time, direction, and orientation to publicly available flight maps of all air traffic in the United States.
Well, yeah,
Then they narrowed it down even further because it was a 24-hour stream. So at night they would see how the stars were moving in the sky to pinpoint his like latitude and shit like that. That's where they did the contrails to narrow it down to an even smaller radius. And then, God bless them, some idiots went out and were driving in the general area and just constantly honking their horns, and then cross-referencing that with the time of and the volume on the stream. And so they narrowed that down into an even smaller radius. And then they just sent people out and be like, all right, he can only be so many places in this radius. They saw the flag, and that's where they sent their little goons out to go pull down the flag and replace it.
And if you've got a bunch of autists on 4chan doing this for a troll, imagine applying that to finding an HBT, particularly one who has an ego on him and is posting propaganda and threats and shit like that.
Well, it depends on how much he sounds like Andrew Tate, because then they might side with him.
Yeah, there's that too.
But yeah, I mean, so that's just for fun. What you're getting to though is like what happens when you're in a war for keeps, right? It's like when losing this might actually mean the end of everything you like. Maybe you'll get more of them. So
yeah, for the Ukrainians, they definitely view this as an existential fight.
Yeah,
they are fully committed. I get irritated periodically with some of the Ukrainian commenters that badmouth the countries that are making their current survival possible because they're not getting everything they ask for in unlimited amounts without limit, without qualification, indefinitely.
Yeah,
and
they're definitely there's a sense of ingratitude, but you can kind of understand because it's all on the line for them.
Sure.
But yeah, it does piss me off that they're like, oh, the U.S. isn't supporting Ukraine enough. And like, enough? You would have been gone in the first 4 months if it weren't for us. So.
Right. And just like the aid we've poured into other countries in the last 30 or 40 years, or last 25 years, notably, I very much doubt, other than the operational lessons learned and the chance to get rid of a lot of toxic ordnance that was probably exuding nasty chemicals in some freaking armory somewhere, we're not going to get a lot out of it. They're not going to have long-term gratitude. They're not. No. They're not a major or even a significant economic partner to us. So all the money that goes over there is a sunk cost. We're never going to see it again.
Well, it depends on where on the level of the U.S. government you consider us.
Well, thank you.
The higher you go, the more it's a very lucrative trading partner.
I'm referring to Joe Sixpack, who's currently boycotting Bud Light.
Yeah.
No.
So, the degree to which we continue to spend money profligately is pretty concerning. It cannot last forever. I've been saying it can't last forever for 15, 20 years, and so far I haven't been proven right. So maybe eventually. But gosh, we just keep spending and spending.
So, I mean, on one hand, it was less of a problem before China was overtly trying to replace the petrodollar. Mm-hmm. But before that, it's like if we crashed, everybody crashed. So it didn't matter how much we spent. Everybody was just like, yeah, no, your credit's still AAA, whatever. So
we're still a long way away from the yuan being able to replace even fractionally the U.S. as a reserve currency. Where could it happen? It would require them to do a lot of restructuring in their own markets that I don't think they want to do.
Right, but they do want to weaken us to the point where we get very upset about it. But like the early 2000s, that wasn't even on the horizon. So it was like, yeah, we can spend as much money as we want because we're also propping up the next 50 biggest, economic partners in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, you went over your debt ceiling, but we're just going to ignore that. So
right. Yeah, that can't go on indefinitely. But where the line can be drawn with any degree of confidence that this far and no further, or else bad things happen at that point, isn't clear, because so much is driven by sentiment. And as long as everybody thinks they've got 3 hots and a cot, they're pretty happy.
If it gets to the point where people cannot afford necessities because the inflation is so bad, then we're going to see some movement, and it's not going to be good. It's not necessarily going to get to the level of Sri Lanka, not immediately, where they were hunting their politicians in the streets because there was no gas and no food. But a lot of people on our side of the pond basically, and they've said as much publicly for the last 15 years. It's like, oh, it's just debt to ourselves, so it doesn't really matter, and we don't ever have to pay it off, so who cares? Well, we've already started to see some of the impact of that.
Yeah. 21 and 22 really sort of shook that sentiment.
Yeah.
So,
well, the next challenge in our economic cycle is not being adequately forecast, and I think it'll be really hard for whichever American political party holds the White House and Congress to justify an indefinite, or the perception of an indefinite, inordinate spend when the next thing hits. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, but gosh, like you said, the readiness of our voters, or the mob, if you will, to accept that as status quo is directly tied to their perceived comfort.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We're certainly flirting with the conditions that make that possible. That's for sure.
Yeah. And it's going to take a while for that sentiment to actually like trickle out to the larger populace, is because a lot of it's the public perception. And when social media is tied around showing highlight reels of your life, like nobody's really gonna like understand it. Like it's not just you fucking up, everybody else is in this too. Because if you're feeling financial hardship and then you go online and all your friends are like, oh yeah, here's my beach photos from this vacation, you might feel like, no, it's just you did something wrong, as opposed to like, no, we're all getting screwed. So
right.
The tendency to be terminally online has skewed a lot of people's perceptions.
Oh, it's terrible.
The online world is not the real world. And
I think that the effects of being terminally online or participating in one or more aspects of unhealthy social cults has very real consequences that spill over into what I think of as the real world, and broad consequences too, not just for the individuals involved. Witness a legitimate proliferation of dumbasses picking up guns and shooting their neighbors or strangers.
I'm not denying that it spills over. What I'm saying is that the world they're necessarily perceiving through this being terminally online is not real. And
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
see this elevated volume of freakouts about anything and everything, and then you start to dig a little bit, and it's like, okay, you've got about 50% of the details right, and the other 50% are completely friggin' wrong.
Well, yeah, it destroys the sense of local community in terms of what your priorities are. Like, people in Texas are freaking the fuck out over like how bad San Francisco is. So it's like, you're not in San Francisco. So
yeah. It's like that. Well, it's destroyed a sense of scale too.
Yeah.
It's like that meme that I found the other day of comparing the length of the Italian peninsula and the length of the Florida peninsula, and they're the same. And it's like our states are the size of entire European countries.
Right.
Well, that just means that the Empire of Florida is going to be as big as the Roman Empire was at its max. So.
That was pretty big.
We're going to get the rest of the Gulf Coast. Just you wait.
The Gulf Coast will become a Floridian lake.
Yeah. The Empire of Long Florida.
The Gulf Coast. Whew. I'm surprised at how expensive prices have gotten in Florida. Condos in Tampa going for $1 million.
Well, it's because everybody's trying to move there. It's insane. You can ask Pete about how his local real estate has skyrocketed because of the Californians.
And because of friggin' Yellowstone.
Oh, are you up in Wyoming?
No, I'm actually in Montana.
Okay.
But we've had a whole bunch of rich ass clowns move up here because they watch Yellowstone and say that looks great up there. Like Kevin Costner should be punched in the mouth just for that.
Well, they missed the part where his character is supposed to be like a multi-millionaire, right? Like he's in the top 1% of that state.
Well, the irony is that the show makes fun of the Californians that go to Montana. And what's the name of the youngest son of Kevin Costner's characters?
I have no idea. I've watched maybe one episode.
He's the one that's he plays the role of a separated Navy SEAL. I forget his name. Anyhow, at one point, one of the California implants pisses him off and won't cooperate. So he busts him in the face and rolls him under a cattle grate and chains him there. And goes, California. And everybody cheers. It's hard not to cheer because the caricature is so close to real life.
Yeah, I mean, Boise, Ohio, or Idaho is feeling the same thing.
Like Nancy's saying in the chat there, the Californians that haven't experienced a Wyoming or Montana winter are in for a rude shock.
Oh, we've already known of a few people who just packed up and left this winter.
Well, it's because you stole all their winter coats. It's like you're actively trying to do this.
I've been saying for several years now that we needed some good, harsh Montana winters again to weed out some of the riffraff. And we definitely
over there like blowing holes in people's garages with tannerite just to.
I tell you, when my wife and I move out of California, I'm going to try whatever state we go to. We're going to register our cars in advance of the move so that we roll into the state. It's not with California plates.
Yep, there you go.
My hand to God.
Oh, I mean, I know it's not everybody because, yes, a lot of the people that are moving from California are the people that are disgusted with the California politics. So it's like, yeah, on one hand, you can welcome them. They're not going to do any damage. But the rest of them, though, it's like whenever I see somebody who's not going to get along in another state, but they insist on moving there anyways just because they can't afford California anymore, I always go to that scene in Independence Day where he just got out of that telepathic link with the alien. He's just like, they're like locusts. They move from one world to the next, just consuming and destroying everything.
I thought you were ready to go to the welcome to Earth, motherfucker.
Yeah. Nuke the bastards.
We've had a lot of, quite a few students in handgun and carbine classes who, during the introductions, are like, I'm from California. Please don't hate me. We just wanted to get somewhere sane.
Just because you ask nice doesn't mean I'm not going to hate you, though.
But then we've had one or two that's like, oh, you're one of them and you brought your bullshit with you.
Okay. Yeah, and it's like we're not going to teach you how to use guns just so you can shoot other Montanans.
You're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah.
One of the things that I hadn't thought about before I relocated back to this hellhole state. My mom is in the latter stages of life, and so I wanted to live close to her during that period.
Right. Good luck getting her to move.
Well, yeah. Well, she's not moving. Period. But we're down to a few months left at this point. The number of hardcore Republicans in California is about the size of the population of the state of Iowa, right? Just because they're in a perpetual minority and the Democrats have successfully created a multi-generational single party state system doesn't mean that there are, you go to the central valley of California, you go to Northern California, there's some good old boys there.
Yep.
They don't play.
I actually did like the Mojave Desert when I was there, despite the ranges.
Oh, you were out at Stumps?
I mean, like you do the Mojave Viper pre-deployment training and stuff like that. But I mean, it's a beautiful area. It's just not very comfortable if you're not into it.
It was actually on my second trip to the Stumps for Mojave Viper. It was still CAX the first time I went.
Yeah, well, it was Mojave Viper, then it was CAX, and then it was like ITF or ITX.
It was CAX, then it was Mojave Viper, and then changed it to something else.
All I know is I went through like all of them, so but it's the same shit, just different name. But
yeah, but the second time I went, all of us who'd been to Iraq the year before were just like, I'd rather be in Iraq.
Well, see, when I went the second time, I was like, it looks just like Afghanistan. It's like, it's weird how they put a military base in the one spot that looks exactly like the place where we're going.
Yeah.
The degree of verisimilitude in the combat town, I think it's the 23 area of Camp Pendleton, right off the 5. They recreated like a generic Afghani village for doing company size fire maneuver or route convoy training and so forth, and it looks nothing like what it's actually present in theater.
Yeah.
Did
they have the church building with the bell tower?
Yeah. For all the Christian bell towers you can find in northern Afghanistan.
It's like, I think we're defending that, not assaulting it.
I mean, it's the cinder block combat towns were still a little bit better than the shipping container combat towns.
Yeah. Okay. Point.
I mean, ultimately, you really just need to be able to practice with the geometries and the angles. But
so I have an issue with because if you go into the shoot houses, the ones where you're actually like all the walls are thick enough that you can shoot inside the room and it's not going to over penetrate. The threshold to getting through the door is almost a meter thick. So clearing the doors, it's like you're going to take like 4 or 5 extra steps to get where you need to go. Versus the Connexes, where it's literal sheet metal, so it's like immediately turn and burn. The actual compound, the mud hut compounds that you do in Afghanistan, they're like maybe 1.5 feet thick. So it's like this weird middle ground that you didn't train for. So it's like.
Plus, the doors were probably about 4 feet tall.
Probably about 4 feet tall, and they're also not doors. It's either cloth or it's like made out of like pressed coffee cans. So
yeah,
that's something they never got right, was the height of the damn doorway lintel.
Yeah. Or it's like that giant step down because they dug into it before they built the walls around it.
Yeah. I saw a handful of guys that didn't know there was a step there. And like the first 5 dudes just ate shit on their face. And the family's like, welcome, I guess.
Yeah.
We're here to impress, like that Far Side cartoon where the alien falls down to the bottom of the spaceship in front of the amazed humans. And the second alien goes, hey, great job at trying to, astonish and amaze them. Well done. Good entrance.
Oh, yeah.
You were talking about the houses, the old school shoot houses were often made literally with stacks and stacks of industrial used tires.
Yeah.
And one of the first kill houses they had at the West Coast Island Training Facility out near Calipatria in Island, California, was exclusively made of thousands and thousands of tires. And one of the platoons that went through after we did in the mid 90s, someone made a mistake and loaded tracer.
Oof.
And they ignited not a tire, but but ultimately the entire house. And it made a toxic smoke plume so hot and so toxic that the EPA satellites picked it up, and they sent an emergency response team to see what the toxic burning fire was in the middle of the military desert. It was and it burned for 3 days. It ended up being a major deal, and it was the last time we used tires for that very reason.
So about that at CAX, which got we were going into the ranges, and they're not the tires anymore, probably because of you guys.
Yeah,
but it was like the 3 feet of stucco or whatever. It's like essentially it's the sappy plates, but in structural form. And so it's like we're able to shoot in there, and they've got the pop-up Ivans and that stuff. And we did like 1,000 or like a dozen dry runs, and I knew exactly where I was going to be in this one room. It's like every time, no matter where I was in the stack, I was going to be the first guy in, and I'm going to bead down on this one target. And they hand us 10 tracer rounds each to put 3 at the bottom of your mag, so when you're about to run dry and you can transition to that stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm going to put all 10 at the top of my mag that I know I'm going to have when I go into that room. So that we went into that room, and I just unload 10 tracers at this target about 6 feet from me. And they're still fucking burning because, they've got 90 or 300 meters worth of burn in them. And so this Ivan is just melting in the room. And it's like, did you do that on purpose? Yeah. Why else would I stack 10 tracers in my magazine?
Did they figure out it was you?
My team did, because they were in the room with me, but we didn't say anything to the coyotes or the command. We just like, nope, gotta keep going.
We almost got in a fight with the coyotes in 2006.
We did get into many fights with the coyotes, but go ahead.
There was one of them and like 5 of us, so he backed off, but they wanted us to train step center with stopping in the doorway for a good 2 or 3 seconds.
Oh, like the one thing you don't do in any room clearing doctrine ever?
Yeah. And said, no, we're not teaching our boots that. Well, just for this, no. Go away. Go sit on your little camp stool or whatever, or you're about to get your ass whooped.
Are there any Milosef novels you guys can think of that adequately portray the pathos between training cell and the trained unit? And I'm not including any boot camp type scenes because that doesn't count.
Right.
I'm talking the veteran unit, usually infantry of some sort, whether it be space infantry or not, that's working with training cell on qualifications or refresher or whatever, and they just absolutely hate each other for exactly the reasons we're describing.
So I mean, like Starship Troopers tried to do that, but because it was a political treatise, like there wasn't a lot of hate between the cadre and the class.
Well, yeah, but that was still a boot camp. That Juan Rico was still going through boot camp and training. I'm thinking about like what you guys experienced, where you come back from a deployment, you get some stand down time, re-equip, retrain, and then begin a cycle to deploy the next time. And so you roll back into 29 Palms, or you roll back into Joint Base Lewis McChord, or pick the place you go back to. The ranges. You're kind of salty because you've been there before. You know what to do. And here's the training cadre giving you shit because you didn't pick up all your brass, or maybe you had a training round low order, or hit the wrong target, or pick the thing that they're pissed about that day, and so they start fucking with you, and you fuck with them back. There's a real divide. One of your listeners is asking, what's a coyote?
It's the training evaluators at the Desert Warfare Center out in 29 Stumps. So they're the guys that they're like, to nerd it up, they're like the game masters of whatever training exercise you're doing. Whatever range you're running, they're going to be the guys in like the orange vest so that you don't shoot them.
Yeah, the lane graders.
Yeah, who stand behind you and tell you, it's like, hey, here's what's happening in this scenario. So it's like they'll be the guys that are able to like just go up to the CEO and just like push him down and just be like, okay, you died, so who's taking over?
In a really well run tabletop role playing game, the dungeon master or game master and the people playing are cooperatively telling a story that's fun, and you get to sort of extemporaneously improvise dialogue that fits the story you're telling as you go along. In a shitty dungeon, the players and the game master feel like they're fighting each other, and that's what it's like to deal with a shitty lane grader or a coyote pretty much all the time.
Yeah, when the situation becomes or when the relationship becomes adversarial, that's when shit gets real. Because as Pete was saying, there was one of him and 5 of them. So, that's usually the only way to get them to stand down, because other than that, they have an ego trip. But first rule of fighting Marines is you never fight just one. You fight all of them. So
there's another story on that note. But
yeah, one of with good reason, on the one side, the Marines, the line Marines in a Marine Expeditionary Unit and the attached SOF, so both the recon platoon, the first force platoon and the SEAL platoon on the other side, sort of cordially detest each other, and they embrace the stereotypes of each other. So a lot of tricks and so forth are played. It's harder for the Marines to play tricks, even because there's more of them, because they're being watched every minute aboard ship. But I had a Marine Corps captain try to pull rank on me when I was a JG in 02, and I'm like, really? Like, you're seriously going to try to do this over this? It was a non-important issue.
Yeah,
and I was.
That's the only thing they argue about.
Oh yeah, there's nothing else to fight about. So I knowing that the Marines were required to keep very, very close control and accountability over every round of ammunition, I took a handful of Winchester Silvertip 9mm and I scattered it underneath one of the Marines' CB shelters, like a small Conex box, with one round barely peeking out from the shadow, artfully placed, and then went on my way. And within 45 minutes, some non-com found it, and they turned out every piece of gear on every Marine on that ship repeatedly for the next 3 days, looking for a cache of Winchester Silvertip.
Yep. We were over at Fort AP Hill, and this would have been like 2010. And we devoted about 3 days straight of gear turnover and police calls on ranges we had already run, looking for a radio.
Oh.
It was the first sergeant's radio, and he found it in his pack after 3 days. After
we
constantly yelling at us for misplacing his gear.
We had a situation somewhat similar to that. Fortunately, the whole company didn't have to go out and sweep the training area, but seemed one of the team leaders, who was not a team leader anymore after this incident, had taken the 203 off of his M4, put it in his ruck, and when they got back, it was not in his ruck.
Oh,
it was in my ruck. 3-6 Mafia, bitches.
The Marines got us back in 13th MEU. During Cobra Gold, there was a very new first deployment E3 communicator, Marine. And when he got back to the ship, as the exercise was winding up, he had to account for all of his serialized classified material. And among those things it's called a one-time pad for field encryption, and every page is a serialized individual artifact. And he was asked to account for his one-time pad. He hands it over. They're like, well, where's these? There's 9 pages missing. Like, yeah, I used them. They're like, okay, but where are they? It's like, well, they're one-time pad sheets. And they said, well, yeah, but so where are they? He goes, well, I got rid of them. I threw them away. It's a one-time sheet. And they're like, no, really. He's like, no, really. And we're like, for real? And they disembarked the damn ship, including us, the SEALs, and we all got in line and walked through the jungles looking for, and we found every single one. I didn't personally, but they were all accounted for. He was not a popular man for the rest of that cruise.
Yeah, were they covered in shit because he used them as ass wipe?
But when they were turned in, perhaps. What I know is that every day we spent doing that was one less day that we got to spend ashore in Pattaya. So the battalion was incensed.
For very good reason. Yeah. Yeah, those kind of things don't make it into mill sci-fi books very often.
Do you think that's because they're too hard to translate to the audience? Why is that?
I think because if I'm a civilian reader and I'm reading a story that takes its time out to do that, I'm thinking this is bullshit filler that's wasting my time. Because it might not click with me that this is to portray an authentic experience in this unit or anything like that. It's like I was talking to Pete about this the other day. Readers in general are like the most sociopathic motherfuckers ever when they're reading the book, because a character will die and they're not an important character. Maybe they weren't even named. And like, if the main character is sad about it, they'll be like, "Get the fuck over it, pussy! You didn't know his name. He wasn't an important character. I don't give a shit that they died." But it's like, no, if you're in the military, you've probably come across like somebody you didn't know who got hit, and you feel like responsible about that you either didn't save them or it fucked you up, or whatever. You don't like seeing civilians killed. So to us, a nameless, faceless person dying is kind of a tragedy, even though we pack it away and we move on. But to a reader, it's like, no, that's just a waste of paper. Like, you didn't earn it. You didn't flesh out that character before killing them and things like that. So
it's not every reader, but it tends to be the more vocal ones.
Like I said, in general, and I'm not even saying that they'll be sociopathic throughout their day, but when they're reading the book, it's like you're spending effort and time and words on the page to do something that I don't care about. I think that kind of circles back to the rear time and the training evolutions on in a mill sci-fi book.
I mean, that is not even when there's a humorous element into it, and the characters can explain, what makes it especially poignant or funny. Like I
think that would be the way to put it in there, or to do like character development of like the unit bonding over this bullshit that they all have to go through.
It kind of depends on the type of story you're trying to tell.
Yeah.
If it's more stretched out, kind of more of a told almost as a memoir, then I think there's a place for it. If you're trying to tell specifically a war story, it's like, I don't get into the nitty gritty of the 6-hour planning process in a thriller, because it's like, well, that's kind of the boring part.
Yeah. It's also it's a lot of it's like economy of how many like words you're trying. Like, if your story's 80,000 words, like how much time do you really have to devote to the rear echelon stuff or the training, fracases and stories? And the other thing would be like, what if they're not a veteran author? What if they're a civilian author who's writing mill sci-fi, and they might not have those experiences to draw on? So I think that's what like might be why you don't see too much of it. But I mean, you see a lot of it in nonfiction war books, like if it's following a unit at a particular battle, like Colder Than Hell is a good example. It's a book about a company in the Battle of Chosin Reservoir in Korea, and it's written by one of the LTs that was there. So it includes a lot of like the just the bullshit that people do back and forth, between firefights. In the visual mediums, like Band of Brothers and the Pacific did a lot of that, where it was, just like the whole first episode of Band of Brothers is that sort of training bullshit. So it might be a little bit more palatable in a visual medium than in a book form, but I don't know.
It could, like I said, I think it depends on what the focus of the story is. I think that, again, not everybody who writes Mil SF has necessarily been in the military and been through some of these sorts of things.
You know, I can name 2 authors that successfully incorporated it, and it made the books more authentic for me because I could relate to that activity, whether it's in Johnny Ringo and Dave Weber's March series. In the very first book, when the Space Marines land and the Space Marine NCO has to remind her already experienced troops the rules for making sure they're hydrated, and she goes through the litany, and it's kind of ridiculous, but everybody who's ever been in that situation is like, oh, that's actually kind of spot on. Or Nick Cole's Forgotten Ruin, with some of the peculiarities of the Ranger culture that are unique to the Rangers.
Yeah.
Whether it's the reoccurring knife hand jokes or, and all that. Things that aren't directly related to the action and maybe don't directly build the point of view character's character arc, but increase the realism, at least it did for me. And I wondered, there's probably some things that just don't matter. And there's others that you can incorporate that have that ring of truth that would draw the reader in. But like, if readers that just don't know, like the earlier commenter that asked about what's a cheetah, if the characters never talk about who the cheetah is, if you don't have the dumbass first time ever been to the Desert Marine who hears him talking about cheetahs and he goes, cheetahs, like they're in freaking Africa, and somebody smacks him in the head and goes, idiot, shut up. You've been here long enough, that we're talking about the assholes in the orange jackets and then he explains for the benefit of the reader.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of have that. I think one of the reasons that your 2 examples are John Ringo and like Nick and Jason with Forgotten Ruin is those guys know exactly who they're writing for.
Yeah.
And they're writing for the guys that all have those same kinds of experiences from their time in the mill and will identify that and be like, yes, that's authentic. That's accurate.
Yeah. I
always laugh whenever I see on social media or the book reviews where somebody's like, yeah, I like the concept of the Forgotten Ruin or Galaxy's Edge and all that. But man, they never shut the fuck up about being Rangers and all that stuff. It's like, have you talked to a Ranger? Like,
my only ding on Jason and Nick on the Rangers is he seems to exclusively present them in an overwhelmingly positive light. And having known several Rangers in real life, they have their share of fuck ups and internal unit. Like, can you believe this motherfucker? Moments too.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's what I appreciate about Pete with the Lost series is in the first book, especially because in the sequels they sort of weeded that part out. But there is a lot of intra-unit conflict, as it were, and a lot of it stems from competency and personalities and things like that. So,
yeah, there are SEAL platoons that work up at the same time, squadrons now that work up at the same time, and if they just develop a grudge against each other, and it's a long-running, medium-hot, legit, we're going to hurt you kind of war. We're not going to, no one's going to die, but you might have a few broken bones or missed deployment if we get lucky, kind of thing.
Yeah,
and it's basically training for partisan warfare, and it can be very distracting, actually.
Oh yeah, just hearing SF guys talk about like, 5th versus 7th group, like, you'd think it's a gang war, like.
No shit. I worked with 5th group guys, and they wouldn't shut up about how much they hated the 7th. We hate the motherfuckers more than we hate you.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also it might as well be street names, like, oh man, those 7th Street motherfuckers, like.
Yeah, it's the Jets and the Sharks.
Well, it's like
well, they're better dancers than the Jets and the Sharks. So.
There's a YouTube channel, Mandatory Fun Day.
Yeah.
And one of his little shorts is about, I need you to come with me because Smith didn't show up for work the last 2 days. So we're going to go to his house and we're going to haul him out into his front yard and we're going to beat his ass so that he loves to show up to work. It's like, did I join a gang?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, in fact, you did.
Yeah, you absolutely did. And it's blood in, blood out. Like, you don't get to leave.
You leave him feet first.
Yeah.
We had a frogman who joined a multi-level marketing scheme, and that was a tough call, man. He rediscovered the joys of hazing, and he bit in. He was like an E5, and they're like, "No, we're not having any of that shit here." No. He actually ended up being wildly successful and got out before his retirement date because he was making so much damn money.
Did y'all feed him to the dolphins?
I've been asked questions about Chopper, and I've had people get mad at me for portraying cetaceans in a negative light. Like, you're perpetuating stereotypes about dolphins that just aren't true. I'm like, first off, you don't fucking know. I had the separated ribs and the fractured nose to prove it. But number two, imagine that I said something you thought was hurtful about a long-term inmate of San Quentin, right?
Yeah.
Remember, this isn't an average person. A person that spends 20 years in San Quentin is not a normal person in any way, right? They don't react the same way. They don't have the same triggers, the same values, anything. So even if dolphins were sweet and kind and gentle in nature when raised properly in the glorious Pacific or Atlantic Oceans, and they're not like that at all, even if they were, you take one of them away at birth and slap it in a pen and treat it like an infant for 20 years, you've got a psychopathic dolphin. And you've added that to a species which is innately ADHD, easily distractible, and perpetually horny and violent. What do you think you're going to get out the other end? So, yeah, Chopper the dolphin. So I tried to explain that without using profanity and without raising my voice, and I failed because when I think about him, it gets my blood pressure up. But it was fun to bring him back into a story and turn him loose on a bunch of imaginary Chinese divers.
Now you just need real Chinese divers.
The thing I had to double check, and I was kind of surprised, is the existence and mission and details of the Mark VI system, which is let's call it the force protection anti-swimmer system the Navy still has to this day, was very highly classified in the 80s and the 90s. Like, you just didn't talk about it. Like, you just, we have mammals that retrieve torpedoes that fail to arm or find sea mines. If you go to Navy.mil and look up the demo programs, they've got a picture of a Mark VI system tagging a diver with a caption that reads, "This is a Mark VI system tagging an enemy diver."
Yeah.
Like, holy Jesus. Okay.
Well, they've already done like 6 different Discovery Channel documentaries just about that, future weapons with dolphins.
I think it was 2014.
What's that?
MARSOC switching out with SF dudes in Iraq to work against ISIS was all over the Marine Corps Times. It's like, dude, I remember when we weren't even supposed to tell our families we were going to Iraq, when that was where everybody was friggin' going anyway.
Right.
But you're gonna put soft deployments on the front page of the Marine Corps Inquirer,
while the enemy has gotten even more tech literate. And
yeah.
So my son recently separated out of the military after several years, and he always called the Navy propaganda internet magazine Navy Times. They always he and his friends called it Navy Crimes because it always highlights, who got busted or relieved of command or this, that, and the other thing.
Basically a blotter list just for
right.
Yeah.
And I don't know, do the Army and the Marine Corps refer to their respective Times articles the same way?
We called it the Marine Corps.
We had so many names for the Marine Corps Times. But Marine Corps the Marine Corps Gazette turned into like the multi-level marketing, like the Watch Mojo of gear that the Marine Corps was coming out with and shit like that. Like, here's why your new Camelback is superior to the old ones, and you're just like, it's shit. It's more plastic.
See, I remember when the Gazette was actually a legit professional publication.
Yeah, they used to put tactical field problems on the back page, and then you could submit your answer, and then they was graded. And if you had a good one, they'd publish your answer and then kibitz it a bit. and they were good enough that we actually used some of their company and platoon sized maneuver problems to educate our guys. And so
that's back when they were trying to win the war, not sell you on the latest acquisitions. And I might be thinking of Marine Corps times, but like they were all wrapped up in the same stuff. Like, first off, good luck telling an E3 and Marine Corps that all the official Marine Corps publications aren't just blatant propaganda. It's like they're intrinsically going to distrust it. So, but
Terminal Lance, it's a thing.
Yeah, like he got published in the Marine Corps Times and immediately like rolled back his the salty Lance Corporal hatred for the
he lost any credibility. He might have.
And so everybody was like, you were funnier when you were angrier.
So he went straight. He went legit.
Yeah, after spending enough time in San Francisco and getting deals with the big Marine Corps.
I follow him in a couple different media platforms, and he seems to have chilled out pretty hard. But I didn't know that he had sold. I mean, if you wave enough money at somebody, they'll write over to a cartoon you want. Sure.
Oh yeah, just wait until we get sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. I'm going all in.
What's the name of the guy that does the stick figures, one for each service?
Sketch's World.
That's it. Sketch. Yeah. I find his to be pretty hilarious.
Not out yet.
No. And I guess he just got out like last year or the year before, and
I didn't realize he was still in for that long.
Yeah, but his from some of his vague booking, it did not sound like it was the most copacetic separation from the Marine Corps either. So I don't think he's going to be selling out or mellowing out much anytime soon.
He won't be featured on the Marine Corps Gazette.
No, probably not.
No.
That's like the Marine Corps with bloody fangs, head back, autistic screeching, with the serrated knife.
I know.
Well, it's like broken and unreadable as well. Like you can tell. Max Uriarty definitely got out of the Marine Corps just like a Terminal Lance, and he was salty about it. But he made enough of his living from the active duty Marine Corps that like he softened up on it. Yeah, they never offered any deals to broken and unreadable, so he is still like the typical, E3, E4 that gets out, and he's just like, this is bullshit.
I haven't been able to find any of his stuff in years.
No, I think he mellowed the fuck out. Like in terms of he found something else to pour his efforts into, whether that's like a day job or he just moved on. But yeah, I can tell you from reading that strip, like he was grunt to the core, whereas we'll talk off air on this, but Max likes to play up the grunt stuff, but he was not well liked.
I didn't remember the name of the comic, but I just looked at a picture of it and now I recognize it. And I'm like, oh yeah, 100% I remember this dude. The guy holding up the severed arm said, "Give me 5," and the NCO says, "This ship better not end up on YouTube." And it goes, next page, YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but which got the guy who did Broken Unreadable, he was a big Galaxy's Edge fan. Like he posted that stuff on his page. He's just like, hey guys, when I'm just trying to unwind and that stuff, I just pour into this series. So
him and Sketch, because Sketch is a huge Galaxy's Edge fan. Like Sketch,
I might be thinking of Sketch. I might be thinking of Sketch.
Sketch has made Galaxy's Edge comics.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't know that. Really?
Well, if you're watching, buddy, big fan. Sorry about that.
I had a poignant moment. We kind of diverged from OSF, and also I'll embrace that. I had a poignant moment the other day because there's a shop in Coronado now closed called Bullshirt, and from class 40 to about class 320. And for the folks that are listening, that all SEAL classes are numbered sequentially and don't repeat. So it's basically from the late 60s to the early 20 teens and mid 20 teens. They were the exclusive provider for the shirts that the SEAL students would earn after they completed Hell Week. And each class had a unique design. Some of them profane, some of them rah-rah, some of them kind of like, really, guy? Okay, whatever. As an example, Class 203, I told Johnny Ringo about it. He made him famous in his Ghost series, are the ones that got the core temperature study during Hell Week. And so their t-shirt said, Class 203 winter Hell Week, we took it up the ass. But the shop went out of business, and all the silk screens and all the designs, all of it vanished. It all went away. And one of the features was you had to buy your shirts for life. All the ones you could buy, you prepaid at the time that you graduated buds, and they were there for you to pick up. So we thought they were all lost. The shop went out of business. No one could find the stuff. And a few weeks ago, I don't know the details, but someone found they found the cash and began passing the unpicked up items out. And he was left with a stack of about 60 or 70 boxes with the guy's name and the class number, saying, hey, if you know any of these dudes, I got their shirts. And I began reading the list of all the boxes. And about 3/4 of the list are the guys that have been KIA in the last 15, 20 years. They aren't coming to pick up their shirts no more. And it was a real holy crap. I didn't need to see that today. So there, he's looking for next of kin, and the ones that don't get picked up are going to go to the SEAL Museum in Fort Pierce for just for storage or however they get handled. But it's occurred to a lot of folks that this store had the definitive list of all SEALs past and present in civilian commercial hands. Oh, hello, OPSEC. Now since resolved, since the shop is gone and the inventory is back in the hands of the community. But holy mackerel, what a thing to see. I know that guy, he died in 2000. I know that guy, he was on, oh shit, yeah, that was Red Wings dude. That's another Red Wings dude. And it was it didn't take everybody very long to figure that, like about probably 30 seconds of reading it. So I was surprised to learn. I hadn't really counted it up recently how many guys died. But it was something else to see that stack of t-shirt boxes that were all prepaid that weren't going to get picked up. Some of them going back a long ways, like guys that were 8s and E9s that died doing a variety of things in the last 20 years. So their classes were like class 98, class 104, like that.
I worked with a dude who was on the second bird going in on the rescue on Red Wings. Saw the first one go down.
Oh, okay. One of the it's interesting. A lot of I won't say a lot. A not trivial number of SEALs have dads that were SEALs, and one of the guys that went in, one of the 14 guys that died on that Chinook was Shane Patton, and his dad Jim Patton was one of my teammates. I worked with him very closely during my time in. He was the lead chief petty officer at First Phase for a while, among other jobs. And so that was it's one thing to see your buddies or see people that you know firsthand, and it was an entirely different dynamic to recognize the name of one of your buddies' kids. There are a lot of things get to unpack in that, but yeah, it was something else. And yeah, not trying to sober things up, but that was an example of sort of unintended consequences of loyally being patrons as a community of a single shop for so long. They had the definitive list of all SEALs. Probably better than freaking Nav Milpers in Millington, Tennessee.
Almost guaranteed better than.
Yeah,
I wonder if that's how like a lot of the Stolen Valor stuff is determined. It's like, was that guy a SEAL? I don't know. Call the t-shirt shop. Let's see what the bullshit list is.
While they were running, bull shirts was very close mouthed. If you wanted to go back and look, they had to flip your ID. They check that against a handwritten list, and they say, "You got 2 shirts left. Which one you want, the blue one or the white one?" So give me the white one. They were reasonably. You couldn't take pictures of the shirts if you tried. They get mad at you and they kick you out of the store. So they did a reasonably good job, which is one of the reasons why the teams used them for so long. Became institutionalized. There is so much SEAL crap everywhere. Not least of it's because some SEALs can't shut their fucking mouth holes. That it is a trivial exercise to be able to rattle off enough trivia to satisfy the uninitiated. But every now and again, someone tries to pass themselves off
to the wrong person. What boat's class are you in? 169. No shit. No shit. Huh. You know, I was in 169 and I don't know you, motherfucker.
Yeah.
I meant to say 169 East Coast. That's not what we can show you either.
I've run into that a couple of times. Like I just fly on the wall. Like we were at the same table at the DFAC when a couple of SEALs were calling each other out. But we also, it was like, Pete, you remember, I'm not going to say his name or call sign, but he was trying to like pass himself off as like a Det 1 guy. And it's like, okay, there were like 50 guys in Det 1. They all fucking know each other. And these two guys are from there and they don't know you. Like,
and I actually knew one of the Det 1 team leaders and I hit him up and hey, here's the dude's name. Says he was Det 1. Is he one of yours? And I immediately got back. Never heard of him.
Yeah.
Was the guy trying to pass himself off on active duty?
No. This was after the fact. We were just doing some contractor stuff. But his resume was incredible. It was he got like OJT'd on the force and that stuff. It was like, all right, so they haven't done that since like pre-04 and shit like that.
Yeah. The fact that dude didn't get immediately fired was already souring me on an extremely disillusioning job.
Yeah. Well, yeah, manning requirements, bro. But yeah, it's always funny seeing that, bro. And it's actually funny seeing that in like sci or military books and fiction books is where it's like they never seem to really like get it right, where it's like some guy's trying to pass himself off as something he's not. And one guy will notice a detail and just immediately call him out. It's like, no. Most of this stuff is usually like the guy who knows what's up gives that dude enough rope to hang himself with. It's like a cat playing with the mouse it just caught, you know? It's like,
what's the color of the boathouse at Hereford?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Ronan got that one right.
That
was a great moment. What is the color of the boathouse at Hereford? How the fuck should I know?
Fun fact, they exchange instructor staff between Coronado and Hereford and the guys in Poole, the SPS Bubbas. So I could have answered that question, but I wouldn't have been hired by an ex-RA guy to make a hit in Bruges.
I don't know. How good's you driving?
Not as good as the guys that drove in that movie, that's for sure.
It's like a 2-hour movie, and like 40 minutes of that is just straight, like no dialogue, just driving.
But it's some pretty good driving, though.
Oh yeah, no, the car chases are amazing.
My high point in evasive driving was being at Bell Scott Raceway when the various government agencies used to send people there for defensive, offensive driving, and they figured out really early that the SEALs, you shouldn't put all the SEALs in one car because they're gonna like immediately tell each other, "You're a fucking pussy if you don't go faster. Hit that motherfucker!
Yeah.
Hit the motherfucker!" And you have to make the cars last at least the length of the course to get their money's worth. So they broke us up into groups during my part, at least, and they gave there was like a frogman, there was a guy from Force Recon, there was a State Department guy, and there was a guy from Secret Service. And the guy from Secret Service had not been well vetted, and he began to flinch every time. So the Force Recon guy and I got into it like who could make the guy flinch hardest, so it had the same effect. And we wrecked our car beyond utility and got yelled at.
What, a Marine breaking something? I'm shocked.
Right? Or a Marine being competitive, get out. Yeah. Not even credible.
The unofficial.
My dad, he was in the Navy for a while. One of the guys he worked with was a helo pilot for, this was pre-GWAT, so it's like, the Navy and the Marine Corps are flying their own stuff for their special operations. And he was flying a night insert with a team of SEALs or a platoon of SEALs and Force Recon in the cargo bay, like at the same time. So about halfway through this flight, he's trying, like, I will turn this thing around if you guys don't stop fighting.
Don't make me land this helicopter.
Yeah, it was like a legit fist fight while they're flying in on a mission. He's like trying to like hold people back and shit like that. The crew chief's like, no, fuck. It was like, you guys realize this is a real mission, right? Like it's an op. This isn't a training evolution.
Yeah, the fuck around and find out, and the catch me fuck me jokes. So, are either of you guys going to go to LibertyCon next month?
I'm not.
Nope, afraid not.
Well, I'm getting reasonably excited about going. I've skipped all the other cons this year, and I probably won't go to Dragon this year, but I'm hitting up Liberty, in part because Tennessee is one of the states that we're considering, by no means committed to, but considering as a destination in the next 6 to 18 months. A lot of great things about that area that I like a lot. I don't think I'm cut out for the hard Montana or Wyoming winters. I'm sorry about that, Pete.
Well, I can tell you the Appalachian humidity in the summers is a lot different than Cali. So, you know.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things about Cali that I hate, but I have to give it credit. The southern coast of California has almost an ideal climate as you're going to find.
Oh, I see California as occupied territory because geographically speaking, or like environmentally speaking, it is like the crown jewel of the U.S. But we let a bunch of idiots run it. So,
oh, no argument. There very much is that sensation. I keep all of my firearms that aren't allowed in California out of the state, and a lot of friends go, why aren't you like freaking being defiant and defying the law? I'm like, well, a lot of my livelihood depends upon my ability to not be a felon. Yeah. And I'm not going to be your internet hero that then, can't make any money for the next 30 years just because you think that I'm being I'm giving aid and comfort to the bad guys by obeying the law. Yes. I knew the deal when I got here. That's the deal.
Yeah. That's the funny thing about martyrs is it usually doesn't turn out well for them.
Right. They have a very low personal survival rate being a martyr and all.
Yeah.
But I like them because they're not me. So yeah.
I've never really been able to do the humidity. I've spent some time back in Virginia and didn't care for it, and Georgia and Florida, and yeah, I like my high alpine.
Yeah, but
this winter got a little long for me.
Easily, without exaggeration, 2 months out of the year, sometimes 3.5. You're living on the tundra if you're in certain parts of Wyoming and Montana. Like, it's no joke. A warm, balmy day, it's 15 Fahrenheit with 30 degrees of wind chill.
We got down to 44 below.
That's pretty intense.
I did like seeing the daily updates from Pete. He would just like, I'd wake up and I'd see a photo from him, just be like, I've got this much more bullshit to deal with. Just straight white out.
Or how about the Correas getting a foot of snow every day for like 45 days straight?
The funny thing is, I think Larry could handle that if he didn't have his own range that he wanted to use.
Yeah.
So it's like, I've got to shovel all this bullshit out of the way just to shoot.
Yeah.
He has a legit 1,000 yards of driveway, and he has to plow that crap.
Yeah.
That's a non-trivial exercise.
Yeah, just look what happened during the winter.
They got more snow than we did, I think. And we got ours showed up in November and didn't really leave until last month.
Well, I mean, you're kind of, to a degree, you're kind of like affected or protected by the mountains to the west of you, aren't you?
Yeah, we're definitely in something of a rain shadow here. Yeah.
Coop, are you in Virginia? Or you're in Virginia, right?
Yeah, I'm like maybe 20 miles south of you.
Okay.
But it's like a 45-minute drive, though.
Well, on a good day, maybe. Yeah. It took me an hour
to
go.
Like right now in at 11 at night. It's still a 45-minute drive.
Yeah, the sort of segueing as we get close to the 2 hour mark, segueing to where I came in. pissing and moaning about the freaking traffic in this area. It is different, but I argue worse than LA. LA, you just got to sit and wait for a long time on the I-10 parking lot or the I-5 parking lot or the I-405 parking lot. But people usually aren't actively trying to kill you. Where
you've got Maryland drivers to deal with, which I don't know if you've seen Fury Road, but it's kind of like that. I can say this because I grew up in Maryland. I learned to drive in Maryland. The difference is I also learned to drive somewhere else, so therefore I know how to drive. The people that stayed in Maryland never got that far. So
one of my resources, he's an Army vet named Kevin Tucker. He did a lot of time in the sandbox, has his own company now, very successful business person, lives in Maryland in undisclosed location. And he was my source of information for some of the details of convoy route management and advance or breaking contact in a convoy, because that was a big part of his job when he was working overseas in the sandbox, as it were. And he drives a very nice car, and his solution when there's no traffic is just to leave the bad guy way, 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 way behind, because he owns a very speedy set of wheels. But I have not yet allowed him to drive anywhere, because it's one of those cars that's like legit scary fast.
Yeah.
If you drive it anywhere near the limits of the car, you're way past your own. But it's a beautiful car. I won't say what it is because he may not want to bandy it about. But nice set of wheels.
It's kind of like the newest race guns and that shit. It's like you're not going to operate at the level where that much advantage in the gun is going to make a difference.
And even if you can, at least in the car scenario, you probably shouldn't try it in the street.
Yeah. Oh, especially around DC.
No, Kevin's a good dude. I don't know. Actually, I think all the tickets were purchased. Liberty Con's notorious for selling out. I was going to plug the con, and then I realized belatedly that thing's been sold out for months.
Yeah, probably.
Even though they increased attendance from 650 to 750 a few years back, and then this year they increased it to 1,000 or just shy of 1,000. So we'll see how that works out.
Well, do you think those numbers are changed? I don't imagine Liberty Con was changed too much of their behavior because of COVID, but whatever the state regulations would have been, capacities are lower, 6 feet between and that stuff. So, I mean, comparing 2023 to 2020, obviously they might
for the last 25 years, it's been 650 capped attendance.
Okay.
And it was part of the, I understood it to be part of the limitations associated with being a nonprofit. And if you're chartered at a certain number, changing that number means they can revisit the terms of your charter.
Gotcha.
And they didn't want to do that. And then the peak COVID, Tennessee wasn't allowing that kind of gathering, so they had it virtual. But then the very next year, they increased in size, and they weren't operating under the same strictures as California required, or that Georgia made optional and Dragon Con still made required. So I attended Dragon Con when a mask was required, because I had made a commitment to the organizers, to the program director, that I wasn't going to drop out, even though I thought wearing a mask was fucking useless posturing. Oh, by the way, it turned out that everybody that said that was absolutely right.
Yeah.
But
what if I wear baklava?
Right.
Yeah.
And then so subsequent, and then there were all kinds of waivers for when you didn't have to, and there are people saying, well, I'm right now I'm wearing 2, so maybe I'll only wear 1, so no one thinks never mind.
Yeah.
So this is a real challenge. But as fast as they could open up, Tennessee and Liberty Con opened up, and all honor and glory to their con chair, Brandy. She does a knock up. Steering a con with a bunch of hardcore individualists of all sorts of flavors, some of them not entirely in their right minds, on their best of days, is a chore, and she makes it look effortless, although it takes up a lot of her time.
At that point, you're herding feral cats, not just regular cats.
Yeah, feral zombie cats. But if any of your listeners have an appetite to go to an old school charm type con,
run by a lady of the Deep South and the highest honor, and they want to take a whack at LibertyCon 24. It's one of the few that I unreservedly still recommend, and because the count of people is relatively modest, if folks want to talk to their authors like a Weber or a Ringo or a Correa or a Gannon or pick the flavor, they can get that person one-to-one, have a chat. Something you can't really do at Dragon Con as easily.
Yeah, Pete, get on that.
Are you a non-traveling son of a gun, Pete?
I have been since I stopped traveling halfway around the world 6 times a year for work, but might be. I am going over to the Galaxy's Edge Fan Expo in July.
Oh, where's that going to be?
That's going to be Whidbey Island in Washington State.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's in somewhere around Jason's neck of the woods. But I know Jason's going to be there. Doc Spears is going to be there. Josh Gaiu is going to be there, and I'm going to be there. And I don't know about anybody else at the moment.
Nice.
Are we going to do a live stream from there?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know. I have no idea because the venue's in a field, so I don't know if there's going to be the bandwidth for it.
Bring the cheetah system. Just
but
no, that should be fun. That's why you got to subscribe to Starlink or whatever it is. So.
Yeah,
I don't have that yet, but the folks I know that do are pretty happy with it.
Well, it's like your hotel, not included though. It's like the DC area has really, really, really good internet. Just because obviously everybody around here is all plugged into world affairs and that shit. So it's like we have really good internet in this area, but I'm not trying to stay here for the rest of my life. So it's, Starlink may be a good investment, just not right now. It's like,
where there's shockingly good internet, and one of a not major but tangible factor in some of our calculations is that Google decided to put in a gigabit to the house internet throughout Chattanooga and surrounding counties.
Yeah. Chattanooga, that treats Wi-Fi like a public utility, where like it's required that you have like a really decent Wi-Fi in that area. Like the city will find the providers. So
yeah, and they do competitively, and that drives the prices down.
Yeah.
The way it's supposed to work. I'm a huge fan, an unabashed fan of capitalism. And people then begin giving me shit for how can you say that? And then they give me examples. I'm like, well, because we're not really a capitalist economy, right?
Yeah.
If anywhere that you have true competition, big money looks for a way to consolidate the players and then jacks their prices up.
Yeah. Well, even going back to like Calvin Coolidge, which was like one of the most hands-off presidents we've had, he was like, no, the government's there to create a level playing field for the free market. Like, if you let a bunch of these corporations develop into trusts and all that stuff, like you're not going to have a free market anymore. So,
yeah. And so that's a feature of wherever we move, wherever that's going to be.
Yeah.
That's the feature I'm looking for, is a state that has the minimum accessible burden of state laws that add to the penalty of doing business or living.
Yeah. Well, as somebody was pointing out, I think it might even have been Skousen. There is a lot more parallel between the monopolist and the communist than there is between the monopolist and the capitalist.
Oh yeah.
Well, it all comes down to like, once you're getting at those levels, money and power are they're almost synonymous. Like, why would you trade power for money? It's not because you're greedy. It's because it might be more viable to get, like, you might be able to accumulate more money but that is power, and you're getting the same thing. You're just getting more of it. Or it's like why you would buy power is because you're trading one form of it for the other in a way that can grow or further accumulate. For poor people, money is not power. It's like, I'm sorry, but your, $1,000 a week paycheck is not going to buy you influence. But when you're in the multi-million salary range, yeah, it is. So that's why these giant corporations and their CEOs, they're a lot more attuned to the authoritarian left than they are, the free market individualists. It's because they're trading entirely different commodities than we are. So.
Truth. I've worked with some of the hyper wealthy, and it's a whole different breed.
Yeah.
They're generally not your friend, depending upon who the you happens to be. But yeah, 100%. And then there's graduation, right? Yeah, there's a big name, successful sports stars that are very, very rich, but they're the people that are in the the billions, the three comma money, and they're quietly wealthy.
Oh yeah.
In a way, the average person can't wrap their head around.
But as far as like trading money for power and vice versa and all that stuff, you bring up the sports stars. There's this like somebody did the sabermetrics math on FIFA stars and teams and all that, and they came to the conclusion that like you can actually get a lot more bang for your buck if you go for the non-superstar but still competent athlete. And you just build your soccer team out of these, reasonably competent guys, but you're not paying anywhere near as much for like a David Beckham or whoever the other superstars are in FIFA. But the owners still shell out the money for these superstars because it gets them access to people at parties because everybody wants to associate with the superstar. So it's like they're basically buying their way into this eyes wide shut party or whatever the fuck, rather than trying to go for wins and that stuff with a cheaper team.
I'm sure there's some truth to that, but one of the reasons you might buy a super famous marquee player wherein the cost benefit purely on playing statistics, time of possession with the ball or points put up on the board doesn't match the salary you're paying is because it promotes the brand. Right. And these owners don't make their money on filling a stadium or selling tickets. They make their money on the franchising deals, on the branding of the merch. That's where the big money's at. Yeah. And being able to say, I've got the insert famous sports star's name jersey with that number with my logo, that's cash.
Yeah, they're basically buying the access that the super famous star celebrity player brings rather than the actual most efficient use of their money. So
yeah. My all-time favorite sports movie, far and away, and I'm not a huge sports fan, is Moneyball.
Yeah. Well, it's because it has so little to do with the sport and a lot to do with the sport, like the industry of the sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good movie, but I'm sorry, you can't beat Miracle. Beat the commies with hard work and insults.
Well, gents, I'm climbing on a bird tomorrow and going back to People's Republic at oh my god early. So I regretfully have to begin to excuse myself and pack my shit so I can get up and hop in the car and take it back to my rental company, and then wait in line and meet all my friends in the blue shirts at TSA.
Yeah.
Well, we enjoyed having you. Where can the people in the chat find some of your work?
If they want to read stuff that's already out, I actually have a story in one of Peter's anthologies where Chopper the Dolphin is prominently featured, and you can read about his carefree, fun-loving antics. It's a short one, so it's a quick and easy read. There's some really great stories in that collection. I won't call anybody out, but there's some really good ones in there. My next two shorts are coming out in 24. One an anthology edited by Larry Correa and Casey Azell. which is a urban fantasy noir themed antho, and that should be in March. And then the last Johnny Ringo zombie anthology, United We Stand, should come out in the summer. And I've got a story in that, which will be sort of like think Wedding Crashers meets Romeo and Capulet in the post-apocalypse. So, but my stories in the zombie worlds tend to alternate between super grim and hardcore realism, and then going for laughs, because we all need a comedic break after reading, you know, one grim story after another. So this one is intended to be comedic in its delivery, though heartfelt in its message. So I thank you all, and I'm going to bid you adieu and see if I can gracefully find the how to exit this particular application without making my forefinger the star. All right, night, guys.
Night, Mike.
See you, Mike.
All right.
All right.
All right. Now that he's gone, let's get to the real stuff. No.
All right, folks. So thanks for coming out. And I believe we have Dave Butler next month.
Ooh.
So that should be interesting. So we will see y'all next month.